We made this.
Hello and welcome to Life's Milestones, the podcast about birth and naming ceremonies, relationships and weddings, and death and funerals, right here on the We Made This podcast network. My name's Mark Adams and I am a Humanist Celebrant. I'm also your host for this podcast. Humanist Celebrant, by the way, is someone who is accredited and insured by Humanists UK to be able to write and present non-religious ceremonies for anyone and everyone. While I'm talking about that, any regular listeners to the show, if you are interested in a naming ceremony or a wedding performed by me, then you can get a 10% discount by quoting Milestones when you contact me. If you want to do that, have a quick look at my website, www.humanist.org.uk/Mark Adams, and you can email me on mark.adams@humanistceremonies.org.uk. Today's guest is, well, he's the head honcho of the We Made This podcast network, where this podcast lives. He's the guy that basically allows me to podcast, and I do feel that someone like Tony, who has so many podcasts, is kind of an inspiration to someone like me who just loves to talk about the kind of things I like. I don't just do this podcast. I do podcasts about Red Dwarf. I do podcasts about children's telly. I do podcasts about comic books, video games, B-movies, and goodness knows what else. But it's all through the We Made This podcast network that I get to get my voice out there. And it's Tony who runs it. Tony who does all the crappy admin that I don't want to do. Tony who hosts everything. And I just love being a part of the We Made This podcast network. So it's a pleasure to have Tony on board because, you know, I listen to his podcast. I'm a part of his network and it's brilliant. But what I do have to let you know before I hand you over to the interview is we did have, ironically, considering he's like head honcho of podcasts, we'd had some technical difficulties. We thought we'd recorded the whole show, all 3 segments, but we did lose the footage for the funerals part. And we recorded the first time in May. Schedules and stuff, we then didn't manage to get to record again until August. So there is a 5-month gap in between the segments on naming ceremonies and weddings and then the segment on funerals. So I don't think it really makes much of a difference. You know, there's nothing that's time specific really when it comes to this podcast, but just thought I'd let you know in case there's kind of I couldn't spot it, but in case you kind of hear a blip in sound quality or anything like that, that's because they were recorded in 2 separate sessions. That being said, that's enough for me. I'll hand you over to the interview with Tony.
My guest at this time is Tony Black. Hello, Tony.
Hello, Mark. Thank you for having me on. I feel this is quite a milestone in my life. See what I did there?
I did.
Yeah.
You are I never know what to call you, head honcho, boss man, superpower of the We Made This podcast network. I thought it would be nice to get at least one of the We Made This hosts on as soon as possible. So thank you for being on the show.
Well, thanks. And I mean, I don't know what to call myself either. Probably just podcast workaholic is probably, it's probably my best term, really.
Well, regardless, I'm glad I've got you on because I think getting a podcaster on early will be quite an interesting thing in as much as everyone else isn't really used to podcasting, whereas you are.
Yes, I've done it a little bit over the years, for the last 6 years or so, and running this network with a lot of other shows and a lot of other podcasters gives me some level of ability. But, you know, as ever, with everything, I'm always still learning along the way.
Mm. Right, well, let's move on to our guest profile. And this is usually quite a personal question, but you have received these in advance. How old are you?
I do that classic thing where as soon as I turn the age I am, I'm already saying I'm the next age above. So I am 37, but since around July of last year, I've been 38 in my head. So I'm 38 in June.
I thought I was the only person that did that.
No, I think loads of people do it. I've known other people. The moment you become an age, you're already thinking about the next one.
Good grief.
It's terrible, isn't it? We're wasting our lives away.
Yeah, one of us, perhaps. Okay, so where are you from and what's your general background?
So I'm from Birmingham in the Midlands, and born and bred in slightly North Birmingham. And my background is fairly just normal sort of working class family, really. Nothing too special, nothing too posh. My mum has worked in law for like 50 years. My dad, he's good at maths, so he's been a betting office manager and supervisor for decades as well. So he loves sport and all that kind of thing. And yeah, just a very normal working class background ultimately for me.
Mm. And this is the big one. This is kind of where you get to plug yourself. What do you do that makes you interesting?
Oh, I'm very boring. We might as well skip this one.
No, I'm not sure that's true.
So yeah, I mean, I suppose I've got two sort of bread and butters, I guess. The first one that we talked about is the podcasting. So I talk heavily really about what I suppose you could classify as popular culture. So, my bread and butter, I suppose, is TV and film mainly. Also a little bit of music here and there, a little bit of gaming here and there, books, etc. But film and TV are my two key things. I would say that I've got a fair bit of knowledge about those subjects. I love researching. I love finding out more. I've watched like over 2,000 movies in my life. I've got this app that tracks how many films and TV shows I watch. And I'm up to about 5,400 episodes of television over my life. It's something like 5 months back to back. So I've spent a lot of the time sitting on the sofa, basically, over the years.
I can't think of an app that suits you better than the app that you just described that I'd never heard of to this point.
Well, I tell a lie, it doesn't actually track the movies. The movies I do through another app called Letterboxd, which is also a really good site. But the app for the TV is called TV Time, and it's very good. And every time I watch a TV episode, I track it, I log it, and I put what I thought the rating was out of 5. I'm a bit obsessed with collating and rating these things. So I know exactly what I've watched, and I can refer back to it. And then apart from the podcasting, I suppose that I am a writer, and I've been writing for years. I've written, not professionally, but I've written in an amateur fashion scripts. I used to write scripts for years based on like TV shows and things like that, kind of like fan fiction. I did quite a lot of that. And I've sort of over the last few years segued more into critical writing. So I do a lot of, I ran a website for a time, which was called Set the Tape, which is still going. I created with a friend of mine, Owen. And so I was editing other people's work, reviewing TV shows, articles, think pieces, that kind of thing. And I've got my own website that I've done that on, and I've guest written for other websites and things like that. And I've written a book which should be out hopefully in the summer. It's just taking a long time, particularly with current world events as we record. And that's all about mythology in television shows and movies. And I'm writing a second book as well, all about the history and culture of the Star Trek universe. So I've got those strings to my bow as well, and it's all in that kind of field, really.
Brilliant. So let's move on to talking about birth. When and where and how were you born?
Well, I was born on June the 9th, 1982 is my birthday. And I was born at a hospital called Good Hope Hospital in Sutton Coldfield, which is not far away from where I grew up. And it's colloquially known by a lot of people in that area as No Hope Hospital. People go in there, which is a terrible thing to say. It's not actually terrible. It's not a bad hospital. Although, ominously, there is a cemetery right next door, which always makes me think, what do? Do they just literally fling them over the fence, And
yeah, that's a combination for sure.
So, yeah, I was, in fact, my quite a few relatives, my grandparents, two of my grandparents are buried next door to the hospital I was born in, and there's every chance my mum might end up buried in that cemetery as well, possibly one day. So there's a weird symmetry in a way. So yeah, I was born there, and how was I born was the other thing you asked me, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What do you mean by how was I born? Just the general mechanism and how?
Yeah, whether there was anything interesting that happened during your birth, basically.
No, I think in terms of how I was born, I remember being born on a Wednesday. I don't remember.
No.
I've been told I was born on a Wednesday. I know that there was a heat wave at the time, apparently. So my mum was in labour for hours in baking heat.
That doesn't sound fun.
No. I mean, it would have been hot enough. Trying to, and thing is, what some people who know me laugh at is that my mum is tiny. My mum has always been like really, really small and very thin, and I'm quite a big guy. I'm over 6 foot. I've always been, fairly heavy set, and quite a lot of people say, "Were you born like? Did you come out like this?" And I'm like, "No, that would have killed her."
Yeah.
So, yeah, no other complications as far as I'm aware, really. But I just know that it was a long labour, and bless her, she was boiling. So, I'm sorry about that, really, choosing to be born. Although I love when I was born. I love being a summer baby, because so many birthdays I've had, the weather's been amazing on June the 9th. So it's great being born in the summer, right in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, the alternative for me is being born in September. Honestly, the one day of the year that I can guarantee that it'll be wet and raining and grim is the 16th of September.
Yeah. It's a shame, though, because it can go either way in September. Sometimes you get a bit of what they call an Indian summer, don't you, in this country, especially now, in that the seasons seem to be getting a bit later. So it doesn't really feel like it's winter until like February these days. So... yeah, that's a shame. It's wet rain, though. I mean, that's the thing. Usually I'm quite lucky in that it at least doesn't rain on June the 9th. So, yeah.
Seriously, mark it down in your diary. 16th of September, rain.
I will. I'll check that. I will. I'll keep a track on it.
So, moving on, let's tell me your favourite story from your childhood.
Well, I've been trying to think about this. And weirdly, I've said this before to my wife. I don't remember a lot about my childhood, strangely. And I didn't have a traumatic one in any way. I didn't suffer. It was a perfectly, maybe it's because I was an only child. And there's something, I think my wife has suggested maybe it was because I was an only child. And, there are less, it was very quiet and quite peaceful. There were no, big sibling rows, or there were no marked events where you have those days where it's a nightmare. The only one I remember that makes me laugh is when we were on holiday, me and my parents, and I was probably, I reckon, about 11, 12 years old. And my mum has always been quite a stickler for, she's not a kind of rude anyway. She doesn't like profanity or anything like that, or anything edgy or nothing like that.
Right.
And we were in this car and we were lost. I think it was somewhere like Bournemouth, and we were lost. And we were driving around for ages. And for some reason, and I have no idea why, I suddenly said, "Where the fuck are we?" I was like 11 years old, and I've never seen my mother lose her shit in the way she did on that day. She turned around and she went, "What did you say?" We were driving, and immediately I went, "Oh God, oh no, what have I done?" And she just destroyed me after that. Absolutely destroyed me. And I don't think I've ever said that word in front of her since. I'm now like 38 years old nearly. And I'm still scared to say the F word in front of her because, I don't know what possessed me. I think my dad just sort of carried on driving as if to say, "Oh, you've done it now, mate. you're in trouble now."
Not getting involved.
So, yeah. That, and I'll give you another one actually while I think of it. Not related to my parents, but, I remember when I was at school, I think I was weird at 11 years old, because this is around the same age. So I was about year 7. And I was at school and I was walking home, and these 2 girls who were in my class, and I even remember their names randomly enough, Faith and Leanne, they were called. I don't know why I remember that, but I do. And they were at the bus stop across the road. And all they did, right, was shout across the road saying, because I was known as Anthony then, or Anthony. I was like, "Hi, Anthony," like that, across the road. And because I was I did not have any clue how to talk to girls till I was probably, I'd say, about in year 10, like year 13 or 14. Some lads now, by the time they're 10 years old, they're swaggering up to girls, cock of the walk. I wasn't one of them, right? So, instead of turning round, like any normal young person would, Mark, any normal person in life would turn around and go, "Hi," or whatever, even if you're nervous. What do you think I did?
I suspect it's something pretty embarrassing, otherwise it wouldn't be a very good story.
Well, I would challenge anyone to guess what I'm about to say, right? Because when I look back, I don't know why I did this.
Okay.
I turn round, and you got to imagine me doing this. I turned round and I pretended to be like a cross between a sort of a cow bull, and I turned around and I went, "Arr!" And I did the motion with my fingers like a bull's horn, right?
Right.
And I turned, yeah, right, exactly, right. I turned round, I carried on walking, and they just started laughing like, what the fuck? And I just carried on walking, and even as I was walking, I was thinking, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why? And to this day, Mark, I have no idea why. When they said hello to me, I turned around and I pretended to be like a bull.
I think everybody's got a moment from their childhood where they did something so utterly peculiar.
Weird, yeah, peculiar.
And they can't justify it. They can't explain why they did it, but they probably learned from it.
Yeah, well, what I learned was that I was weird. I think maybe that's why I didn't really properly talk to girls then for another 3 years, because I was like, if I talk to them, I'm going to pretend to be some sort of bovine animal. Like, I can't do this. Yeah, very strange. I was a very strange boy, clearly. I think I lived in my world of like TV and films, and I didn't know how to talk to people, particularly girls.
Going back to your thing about your mum, I think, again, that's something that a lot of people remember, is the first time they swore in front of their folks. And, yeah, I got a similar reaction from my dad, so I can definitely empathise with that one too.
It's funny as well. Yeah, it's interesting because I've thought about this since, and I know you're going to ask about this soon, but I don't have children yet. And I'm thinking in terms of what kind of parent I'd be like. And I feel like I wouldn't want to be effing and blinding in front of my kids or anything, but I feel like I wouldn't be furious if they said a swear word. I would say, why is it you've said that? You know, I'd be more like, what is it about that word that you think's right? Whereas my mum just shut me down and she was tearing into me and she was, how dare you say that?
Yeah.
Those kind of thing. It scared me straight, sure. But I'm a bit more interested in trying to therapize a kid in a way and go, why is that acceptable? Why would you say that now? What does it mean? Why have you said that? You know, because then when I was 11, I didn't in a way know what that word meant in a way. I just knew it was a bad word, and I'd heard it said in other playground or whatever. Although there wasn't as much swearing on the playground as now, but it was there. But there was no conversation about what that means. You know what I mean? It was just, you will not say that word ever again.
Yeah.
But yeah, she definitely got a message through. I'll give her that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a generational thing, because I would have a similar...
Yeah.
In fact, I do have a similar approach, because I'm a scout leader, and if one of the kids... It tends to be testing whether or not they can get away with it with me, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And if one of the kids... I'm not so bothered by what I'd call the lower swears. You can say crap. I can't be bothered to deal with a child who says crap, thinking that it'll shock me, because it won't. And a child saying fuck won't shock me. But that is the point where I think I need to just sit him down and say, why did you say that?
Yeah.
So I think you're probably coming from a generational thing, because I got a similar rocket from my dad.
You know, I try not to say this a lot, and that I think this should happen, because I'm not a parent, and it's different. It's different for everybody. I get that, but I feel like I would be more interested in explaining why it was not acceptable, and there is a level of discipline I think you should have, but also trying to unpick with them why they said it and why it's not a word to say in the future in that way, in that context.
Yeah.
And at all, really, until you're of a certain age. I mean, I'm not bothered about... I wouldn't be bothered if I had a 16-year-old who said that word as part of a vernacular. They with their mates. It's what kids do. It's what teenagers do. It's knowing the boundary.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I'd be more interested in understanding, really, and helping them understand. But that's just me.
Yeah.
It is generational. You're right.
Yeah. So you said that you don't have kids. Do you want kids in future?
Yeah. I think I do. I did have years ago, like before I met my wife and things, I did have a point where I was thinking, I always assumed I might do, but I wasn't ever sure why I would do it. I was a bit like, why? Like, I'm assuming I will, but why? But it would be great to have them with my wife, definitely. And it's one of the things that we would like to happen eventually, definitely, I think.
So when you do, will you have a naming ceremony, a christening, or any other ceremony to welcome your children into the world?
Well, I'm aware that a lot of this goes back to my mother, but, but I need to mention her again. She could not get her head around why we wouldn't have a christening. Now, the reason is we're not in any way religious. In any way, we didn't have a. I know. Again, I know you're going to ask. I think about weddings and stuff, but we didn't have a church wedding. In any way, we don't hold any belief in any kind of religious thing at all.
Yeah.
So I know I wouldn't have a christening. 100%, would not have a christening in a church. I have no interest that whatsoever. And she couldn't get her head around that. She's like, "Well, you got to have a christening." I said, "No, you had a christening. We're not religious." I said, "No, but." That's up. I don't have to. She couldn't even understand. She didn't even think the baby would be legal without a christening. And I was like, "What? No,
That's what the registrar's for."
Exactly, right? And so again, it's a kind of thing in that. Well, of course you have a christening. Like, no, that's a choice you can make. Just because in previous generations people did it, whether they were religious or not, doesn't mean you do it now.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that's changed, actually. I'd be much more inclined to have some sort of... We haven't really given it a ton of thought, but we would be more inclined to have some sort of welcoming ceremony or naming ceremony, yeah. As part of that. But nothing with a religious connotation, nothing with baptism or putting them in a font or whatever, with God and all that. I don't give a toss about any of that. It doesn't mean anything to me because it's not part of my life. So, and, greatest of respect to people who it is, but I'm not going to pretend that is important to me and we do it just because we should. No. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely not christening.
I'm getting that, but I think there's a lot of, unfortunately, like your mum wanting you to have a christening. I think there's a lot of pressure on people who aren't religious now, who grew up in even a vaguely religious background like I did. My folks claim to be Church of England. I think the last time they were in a church was a random wedding for someone else's kid. They're certainly not practicing, but they are the kind of generation that would still want you to have a christening. And I can't quite get my head around it, particularly if they know that you aren't Christian.
Yeah, I think there's some kind of social thing about it, sort of, and I think this is where generationally, our generation, and particularly the next one, are changing in terms of the way we view the world. In that, I don't think we're as bothered about these social status things that you are accepted that you should do. And that's why in many ways we're much more open to, generationally, we're much more open to gay marriage, we're much more open to trans, LGBTQ, all this kind of stuff, because ultimately all these traditional sort of social strictures of how it should be don't mean as much to us, because I think we've seen a world change and transform, and we've seen so many people unhappy in those kind of worlds, in that kind of dynamics, that we're like, fuck that. We just love who you want, be happy, do it how you want to do it. You make your own path with this, and whether you're an atheist or not. And I wouldn't say I'm a full-on atheist, but I don't believe in any kind of organised religion. So I'm sort of close to that. But I think it is all about that, you don't have to do it the way your parents did it. And if anything, quite honestly, much as I do love my parents and I don't think they did a bad job in any way necessarily, I think there are a lot of things they did that they didn't even think about, that they just assumed they had to do because their parents did it or their parents' parents did it. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, and this is exactly why I want as diverse a group of people as I possibly can on this podcast. So I've gone for a celebrant colleague who's 72, and then I want to talk to someone who's only just hit 18 and see how those two contrast. I find it all fascinating, the way things have changed, but also the way things stay the same. Just because you don't have faith doesn't mean that you don't not only want, but almost need the reassurance of ceremonies in your life. And I guess that's what the podcast is about. It's about how people organize their need for ceremonies. Do you think you would have baby naming ceremonies, a non-religious equivalent of a christening?
Yeah, I don't see why not, really. I think there is something still important about making an event about it and making it special, because it's like this whole podcast, the name of this podcast, it's a milestone. It is a key thing. We didn't, and that's why, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but that's why we wanted to do something. We could have just had a registry office wedding on its own, but we did more. We wanted more than that. And there wasn't a religious connotation. So I think we would absolutely be the same with a child. I think it would be very much the idea of, we want to celebrate this child's arrival in the world and what that means to us and what that means to our friends and our family, and have something to be able to talk with that child about one day and say, look, this was how it all began. This was where we introduced you to the world. Without it being some sort of covenant with a God I don't believe exists. So, definitely.
And have you gone as far as thinking about what you might like to be a part of the ceremony?
Not really. I think we're still theoretically trying to come up with a decent list of names because we're finding that hard. We're like, I tell a lie. We've got a ton of girl names that we really like, but boys' names are murder. They're really difficult.
Not Tony Jr.
Not Tony Jr., sadly, no. I think one Tony's enough for this world. But one Tony Black. I think once we're pregnant and once we get to that point, hopefully, if we're lucky enough to have a child, then I think we would start thinking about that more. But not admittedly yet. We just know we probably would.
All right, let's move on to talking about weddings. The first question is, are we married? And you've already said we know you are.
Yep.
So tell me about your wedding day.
It was great. In a way, we had 2 wedding days. We were lucky because we got married in a registry office first on, I think it was August I should know this really, shouldn't I?
Tony!
August
I'm totally not editing that out either.
No, you better keep it in because I need to be told off for that, really. We got married midweek, and then on the Wednesday and on the Saturday, we registry office on the midweek, and that was just close family. So it was parents and siblings and things like that. And it was a very small group because I'm an only child, and my mum's not remarried, so because my parents divorced, so my mum's not remarried. So it was, and sadly my wife's father's no longer with us either. So it was quite a small group. And then 3 days later, because my wife is from Wiltshire, we went down to a farm in Wiltshire, which is owned by my mother-in-law's partner. And we basically spent the whole of 2018 converting a cowshed into our wedding venue. Believe it or not. So right next to the farmhouse, which is beautiful because it's in the middle of the countryside. There's fields as far as you can see, beautiful woodland, really lovely setting. And this cowshed next to it, we realised could become a lovely sort of partially outdoor wedding venue in the summer. So we were literally, me and the rest of their family down there, and some amazing friends who helped us out and all this kind of thing. We spent months literally mucking out shit. Like
lovely
cow shit up to your top of your thighs, basically. Full of cow shit. We mucked that out. We were pressure washing the walls and the floors. We were painting the inside. We set up lights. We set up speaker systems. We converted an entire area into like a mini kitchen. We built essentially a kitchen for catering staff who came down. This company from the Wirral who were amazing, who came down and did it all on site. And it was just amazing. We've got it all we've got photos of it all, of course, and everything like that. But it was brilliant. And I think it was so intentionally sort of bespoke to what we wanted and what we realised we could do in that environment, that we're quite proud of the fact that will never happen again. Like that, in that place, It
feels to me like by renovating that barn that you kind of earned your wedding in a lot of ways.
Suppose. I suppose we did. We did work for it. Pretty much every weekend across 2018, we were down in that shed, helping out with mucking it out, cleaning it, getting it ready. And it was tough, I won't lie. There were points where my inner grump came out quite a lot. But we did have a wonderful time, actually. And we look back on it now as a family and we're like, do you know what? That made the whole thing... Because obviously the day flies by.
Yeah.
The day just rockets by. But it felt like it was months, really, in that it was all about building up to that. And that whole process of getting it ready just made it even more of a longer experience than it would be if you turn up to a venue on the day, which I know for a lot of people is perfectly great and it's lovely and they have a brilliant time. But for us, it felt more involved. It's like we built our own wedding venue and then helped take it all down again. Because now it's full of shit again. So it's all gone. It's all gone. You'd never know. And we went down there about 4 months later in the winter, and you would never know that was ever used in that way. And you wouldn't believe it either. Like, I'd be like, oh, come on. Do me a favour. No, we've got photos to prove it.
That's so cool. And I guess having that as... You know that no one else can have the same wedding venue as you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And we didn't do it for that. We weren't doing it to show off or anything like that. It was purely the fact that we didn't want to we knew we weren't going to have a church wedding for the reasons I've explained. We didn't want to just go to a registry office and do that, which is fine, but it's very, you're in a production line there. You just get you through one after the other. You're a number, really. And we knew we didn't want that. And, we were thinking of other venues and stuff. And then, we started to think about, my wife is very creative. She's very creative minded. She's always thinking of how to do things, and she finds things online and she reads a lot about how to make a home special or ideas for, creative stuff. She's brilliant. And I think she picked up somewhere that actually, you can convert venues. And then it just felt quite organic, really. And then we just asked the person who owns the farm, and he was like, and he's great because he's very much a kind of, yeah, we can do that. He's a proper farmer. Like, he's like, yeah, we'll give it a go. And he was brilliant in that sense because he did a lot of the heavy lifting there. So it just felt very organic and it felt very like what we wanted. And it's funny because she grew up in the country and I'm a townie and I'm a proper townie. And I never believed that I would ever find an affinity for the countryside. But over the years we've been together, we were together like 3 years before we got married. I've spent a lot of time in Wiltshire, which is a beautiful county. Yeah. Down in the southwest. And I really found that I feel at home down there as much as I do up here. And we will move there one day, I think. But it felt like a real testament for us both to actually get married down there and actually create a country wedding. And it just really felt organic and like what we wanted to do. So, and it came out great. Yeah. I'm really pleased to say it came out great. I will send you some photos actually, so you can see what I mean. But yeah.
So you talked about how you made it unique by creating your own space. On the day itself, you also said that it was unique there. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
So we kind of structured it. So we had a friend do the ceremony as well. So we structured it so everyone sort of had a role to play in a way at various points. So a friend of ours, he was interested in being a humanist celebrant, and he went away and he did some because it wasn't an actual formal wedding day. We'd already got married on the Wednesday, so legally we were married on that day. So he was a great calming influence and to do that sort of ceremony. And he was very interested in that kind of stuff. And we said, you do it then. We don't have to have anything official. There's no registrar or anyone coming for this. We've done all that. But we'll have the ceremony of it. And he did a brilliant job. And he's since gone on to train to be a humanist celebrant, basically.
Oh, right. I probably know him then. What's his name?
Bill Swift, his name is.
I did my training with Bill Swift.
No.
He was on my course.
You didn't?
Yeah, so...
Really?
Yeah, I know Bill. Good grief. It's a small world.
Wow! That is that. My mind is blown.
Now, Bill talked about you during our training.
He didn't. Really? What did he say?
Well, he talked about why he was at the training, and he was like, I married my friends outdoors, and I now want to get the official training under my belt because I've done that, and I like doing it.
Amazing. I can't believe that. What a small world this is. Yeah, and that was it. As was that wedding he's talked about. And yeah, he's a wonderful guy. He's such a zen kind of person. He's gone through a lot. He's had his own ups and downs in his life. but he's a really wise, calming, a gentleman. He's just become a father himself, so I'm very happy for him and his wife, who is also brilliant. And they're two of our best friends. Yeah, so if anyone is in the Devon area, because that's where he's based, and wants a humanist celebrant, he is brilliant, and he's such a lovely man, and he brings such an interest, in, and not just because he knew us, but also he wanted to do it well. Yeah. He wanted it to really feel like it was tailored to us both, and it meant something, and it was more than just somebody getting up there who you don't know, and we were so pleased with how he did it, basically.
I think every humanist celebrant will bring that to your ceremony. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm a humanist celebrant, but having met Phil and having trained with Phil and, seen what he was doing, even in the training, I think you're bang on. He was always going to be a brilliant celebrant.
Yeah, and he's just got that nature to him, I think. But we were so happy with that. We knew he'd do a good job. It's why we asked him, but he really exceeded our expectations, I think. And then we sort of set it up so the whole day had a nice feel of, everyone sat on like hay bales outside, because thankfully we had the weather. So it was under this big tree, which was right next to the farmhouse, which was then right next to the cow shed, which we turned into the venue and all this kind of thing. And, we just tried to have little bespoke touches about us as people as well. So we tapped into my love of popular culture by all our table names were based on famous TV or movie couplings. So we had Mulder and Scully as the top table. We had Kirk and Spock. We had Han and Leia from Star Wars. We had the Doctor and the TARDIS. And a friend of ours, great illustrator and writer, drew the characters. And he did a brilliant job, and he drew them. So they were all pictures with the names on the tables. So that was a lovely little touch as well.
Brilliant.
My cufflinks were the Starfleet logo from Star Trek as well.
Of course they were, Tony.
So there were nice little touches like that. And we also bought each other, and this was something my wife had read about, we bought each other a wedding gift for the morning before we saw each other. So something to open with our respective, in my case, my best man and friends, and then, her bridesmaids.
Yeah.
And we gave each other the present beforehand. She bought some really nice trainers that she wanted to sort of wear. So I got laces done which said Mrs. Black on them, so that she could lace into a tray. I think the trainers were a present from me as well, actually, thinking back. But so she got those to wear on the day. She did me something we've now put up in the house, which was the constellations on the day we were married.
Oh.
Which is really cool. So we've got now the constellations of the farm. So what the stars looked like at the exact point we got married on that farm, basically, on that ceremony day, which is now framed and it's in our living room.
That's cool.
That's a nice little touch to do, really. So yeah, little touches like that, I suppose, made it unique.
And this is a favourite because I'm putting together a Spotify playlist associated with this show. What song did you pick for your first dance?
Well, we went for something maybe slightly unorthodox.
Good.
In that we went for, and the reason, again, people have said, this is how you knew that she was the right woman for you, Tony, when she agreed to this. We had the orchestral track from We Have All the Time in the World from the James Bond film On Her Majesty's Secret Service by John Barry.
Okay.
Which is my favourite piece of music in the world. It is just beautiful. The orchestra, the song itself, the Louis Armstrong, we have all the time in the world.
Yeah.
That is a great song. But the orchestral, that whole album is wonderful. I'm a big film score fan. And the John Barry tune is the most beautiful romantic thing in the world. So we had that as our first dance, the two of us. And yeah, somebody then pointed out to me, I think my best man pointed out to me that he said, you do remember that song comes at the end after James Bond's wife has been shot dead. After he's just got married.
Wow.
And I went, oh yeah. I was like, oops. But apart from that, it really worked well. And then we immediately kicked it into our curated playlist that we put together, which was I think it was Jackie Wilson. Your love lifts me up. That your love Lifts Me Higher, that one.
Yeah,
and then we got everyone on the dance floor and we were off then. So yeah, that was our first one.
Amazing. I love it. And I love it when people do something that is quintessentially them rather than something generic that's still romantic but generic. So it's just a joy to hear when people make their weddings about them rather than about what they think everybody else would want them to have.
Yeah, and in terms of music, I got really annoyed later on. We'd spent weeks putting together what we thought was a brilliant playlist of music that we loved, me and my wife. And we were hopeful that other people would enjoy, but if I'm honest, we didn't care.
No.
We were like, we love it. We want to dance to this. And then by about 11 o'clock, when people, because we didn't have a chucking out time, it went on till like 2 a.m, right? Easily.
Good.
Which was great. So, but it was about 11 o'clock by the time everyone was pretty pissed. Then people started messing with the one of my groomsmen started messing with this, and then other people got involved. And I was like, "Oi, what are you doing? We've curated this." That did my head in, because them started putting on stuff. I was like, "That's not on the playlist." He was like, "Oh, bugger off." So yeah, by then though, I couldn't stop them. They were having fun.
Okay.
You know, I suppose they've got to have fun as well at some point. You know,
I'm not so sure about that. It's your fucking.
Well, exactly.
So we're going to move on and talk about death. The first one is probably the heaviest, maybe not. Are you scared of death?
I think so. It's probably a bit morbid to admit, but I actually think quite a lot about death.
I don't think that's morbid.
I know it's strange. I mean, you know, I'm a late 30s man. I won't say I'm in perfect health, but I'm not in bad health as such. You know, I've got a few little issues, but I'm not in real trouble and stuff like that. I don't know. I really do just often find myself dwelling on it. I have recently with, you know, we're recording the day after we found out that Chadwick Boseman died of cancer.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's just shocked everybody and shook it because he kept it secret. And he did all these amazing films.
Yep.
For pretty much most of the time he was, you know, certainly all the Marvel stuff, for the time he was being treated. And he was 43, you know.
Which is 1 year older than me.
Right, yeah. And it's like 5 years older than me. You know, it's in the same ballpark. And, you know, there was a few moments during the lockdown where people close-ish to me have died. You know, somebody my wife had to do CPR on at work, a work colleague, in a really harrowing situation, who eventually passed away, had a massive stroke, and then somebody I worked with who just was found dead in his flat, and he was 41, yeah. And he just had a brain hemorrhage, I think, and just died in his sleep. And it's those things that, you know, make me think, oh my God, just the randomness of it all. And for some people anyway, or the tragedy of it with like Chadwick Boseman, who's obviously somebody I never knew, but I admired a great deal for lots of reasons. And he seemed like a genuinely lovely man. I mean, aside from the fact that there's been a lot of death anyway lately with the virus and...
Yeah.
You know, all kinds of other things going on in the world. It's not even just about that. It's more about the whole idea of mortality. It just play on my mind weirdly. You know, and more a little bit more as I tend to get older. Maybe that's natural. I don't know.
I think you're probably right. There is an element of it's more natural to be thinking about death as you get older. But I also think that it's natural to think about death because it kind of makes you value what you have and who you have, because everybody knows that we've all got an expiry date.
Yeah, we're all going there in the end. We're all getting there. But, you know, some people just... Or maybe they give this impression, it's not necessarily true, but they bounce through life and they never seem to think about this stuff, you know. I was a little bit more like that when I was a bit younger, throughout my 20s. And the weird thing is, and maybe this is part of it, like you've just said, I would say right now, in the most pleasant and stable point of my life, in a way ever, since childhood. You know, I'm married to a wonderful woman. We've got lots of promise in our future of things we want to do and things we're going to hopefully do. You know, I live in a nice place. I've got a job that I'm happy in. I'm very aware that I have a lot of, well, privilege, frankly, in a way, without being wealthy. I am a fortunate person in the situation of the world right now to be. But if anything, I think more about it now, and maybe that is because in a way I feel like I have more to lose. Yeah. I feel like I have more that I don't want to lose, and I feel like I'm valuing things in a way more. So it does scare me, but what I do hope is that by thinking about it, by engaging more with it, I will learn to make peace with the idea more as I grow older.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. Are you suggesting that maybe as you're younger, you don't think about it much? When you hit kind of our age, almost might be the peak, almost like a bell curve of kind of concern about death, do you think? Perhaps,
because although we are not at the point where everyone around us should be dying or anything like that, in theory, and you'd like to think that we've still got a good 30, 40, if we're lucky, 50 years in us.
Yes, please.
Hopefully, yeah, that would be great. But you do start to, you know, I joke to my wife's 5 years younger than me, and so she's just turned about 33. And I joke, and I always say, you wait till you get to 35, it's all downhill. Right, the moment you get to 35, you suddenly go, why am I aching there? Why have I got this ailment? Where did this come from? Genuinely, once I got to 35, Mark, everything seemed to go to shit. Otherwise,
do you know what? It was 41 for me, but I can empathise.
Well, that's good. You had a little bit longer than I did. But, like, no, it just felt like, I am a bit of a hypochondriac, to be fair, but it did feel like suddenly, in a weird way, I turned that point and I started to notice things more, and more things became apparent. So I don't know. I think maybe it is a bit of a turning point as you get towards your late 30s, 40, and you are theoretically roughly middle-aged, as the term defines itself.
Oh dear! I don't want to be called middle-aged.
Well, this is it. We don't think of ourselves as middle-aged, and if you're going to live till 90, Mark, then technically you're not middle-aged yet.
But if I'm going to live to 80, I am. Bloody
hell.
You are.
Yeah, exactly. But the definition means more when you're younger. You know, you think middle age is like this ancient, this ridiculously far off concept that you're never going to be. So as you get to these age, it's like old people. Old people almost certainly, in some cases, don't think of themselves as being old, even though they're 70.
Yeah,
it's weird, isn't it? It's weird. As you get towards these ages, you see it from a different perspective, I think.
And you maybe kind of nudge what your definition of middle-aged is as you get older.
Yeah.
Old. When you're 30, it's 40. When you're 40, it's 50.
It's 50. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, ultimately, long-winded answer is I hope to be less so as the years go by.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And have you ever experienced the death of a loved one?
Yes, yeah. The only major one really would be my mother's mum, which was 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. My granddad as well. He passed away about 4 years before that, and I was very sad about that. But we weren't as close. He was somebody who was not very much in my life for most of my childhood. He'd pop in and out and give me 20 quid here and there, and that'd be it, really. which to when you're a kid is like getting $5,000. In the 90s, when your granddad gave you 20 quid, I was like, what? I'm rich.
I mean, yeah, in the like late 80s, early 90s, that is rich.
It was. You were rich, yeah. You know, because if you're lucky, you get a few quid pocket money from your parents. To get £20.
Yeah, man.
So yeah, that was good. But it wasn't just that I missed him for when he died. But yeah, and also my nan who passed away, her brother passed away like 5 years before her, and I liked him a lot, and he was my great uncle Stan. He was a good guy. But so yes, but it was my nan really that's been the biggest one, and I've been lucky, touch wood, to not have anybody close to me pass away since, except for my wife's grandmother who died last summer. In fact, almost to the day we're recording, actually.
Right.
She's not family, but she was family by that point to me. She was like, what was lovely about her was that she thought of me as a grandson, and I hadn't had that feeling for years, many, many years, because my other nan passed away. It's a long story, but I didn't see my dad for many years, and she died in that interim, basically.
Right.
So I didn't know she died for about 5 years, 5-6 years after she'd actually died.
Oh, wow, that must have been weird to find out that way then.
It was odd. I kind of thought she probably had, because I knew that when I did see my dad again, she would have been about 96 years old. So
Right.
I thought the chances of her being alive now are probably quite slim. But I hadn't seen her for nearly 20 years.
Right.
So it wasn't a shock. It was more an affirmation of, yeah, I expected that, really. But it's a strange situation when you have no idea your grandmother's died for years.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was sad, but not in a grief way. I don't grieve her as such because, again, I wasn't as close to her. And it felt to me like she'd already died years ago in a weird way, which is probably makes me sound awfully callous. But it's not that I don't care.
No, it's weird, isn't it? You perhaps the phrasing it was wrong, but I completely understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't mean it to sound like I don't care that she's died by any means. But there's maybe more of a distance for me in that. And had she been in my life, it would have been different. I know it would have been different. I had conflicting feelings about the woman, really, but I would have been sad in the moment. But with my other nan, it was devastating. It was really devastating. And because I was 22, I think, at the time, and it was a bit sudden, really. She was about 80, and she did have health issues, but we didn't expect her to die. She wasn't dying for a long time. It was just all happened over a couple of weeks, really, and it hit me really hard. But I remember being at the graveside, just crying with everyone. And I've got a huge family on that side of the family, and they were all there, but they'd gone, and I just cried my eyes out at that graveside. So yeah, I think I've been lucky that I haven't had as much close death as other people. It affects everybody in different ways, as I'm sure you found doing this podcast, you know.
Yeah, and I think I need to maybe start looking at people who aren't in their 30s and 40s, but because I'm in my early 40s, most of my mates are in their 30s and 40s. So I'm going to try and get the perspectives of older and younger people, if I can, going forward. But basically what you've described is close to what a lot of people have said as well, you know?
Yeah, I suppose it's because we're all at the age now where we're losing grandparents or we've lost them. And for most of us, it's like all my wife's grandparents are gone now. All mine are gone. It's sad because there's that aspect of your life is it almost defines youth, having grandparents around.
I think so.
Once they're gone, you realise that your youth in a way has gone as well, I think. It's more of a reminder that the next lot who are going to start clocking off are your parents.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is a sobering thought. It's a very sobering thought as you realise that they're getting towards the age, or they are the age now, that your grandparents were when you were growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my folks are in their 70s. I don't feel old because I'm 40. I feel old because my folks are in their 70s. Does that make any sense?
100%. My dad's 70 next year, and it's going to be really odd to think of him as a 70. Not that 70's ancient by any means, but it's old. He's an old man now, so it's a strange feeling, really.
Yeah. So we're going to move on and talk about your funeral. Do you want to be buried or cremated?
Well, I used to joke, and this just shows how unfunny I am, but I used to joke about how I want to have enough money to be cryogenically frozen for when they cure death.
How very sci-fi.
Well, this is somebody who grew up watching too much sci-fi, Mark, you see. Too many viewings of things like Demolition Man.
Yeah.
But yeah, freeze me, because then they'll cure death one day, and then my wife, I've said that to my wife, and she says, yeah, but I'll be long dead. I said, yes, but they'll have holograms then. So, you know, I can recreate you as a hologram. She said, oh yeah, so what if you die when you're 75, 80? Are you going to recreate 75, 80-year-old me? I said, well, no. I'll create, 30-year-old you. So I'll basically become an immortal Bernie Eccleston in, the year 3000.
Okay, good. I've had some wonderful answers for this, but that's... And, a lot of them have been off the wall. People have said, what... Last episode, Dan was like, yeah, I quite like the idea of being mutilated, and so people can investigate my corpse. What? But you are just as weird as him. Good, I approve.
I absolutely refuse to be labelled the same level of weird as somebody who wants their corpse to be mutilated.
I'm into real life crime, and yeah, he was wonderful guest.
Was this Dan from Pretty Fly?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he's funny. That's brilliant. Yeah, I probably would say burial, ultimately. I have wondered about this. I think, there is something to be said for being cremated and having your ashes scattered somewhere of particular meaning, but I don't know if I'm that kind of person. I don't know, I wouldn't want to be a Gene Roddenberry and get your ashes thrown out into space, or I'm not like a seafaring person who wants my ashes scattered at sea and all that kind of thing. I don't really have anything like that. So I think I'd rather be buried, I think it would be buried in the plot with my wife, or before or with my wife, which I'm guessing she would think along similar lines, really. Because I still think there's something quite calming about that, I mean... I also think a lot about the possibility of anything beyond, and the rational part of my mind thinks there probably isn't, really. My logical brain says no, there's nothing. Like, you didn't come from anything, there's nothing to go to. But I'd like to think the fear of death is lessened if you feel like that person is with you, even dead just next to you in a box, something like that. There's a comfort in that, I think.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned you got some comfort from spending time at your grandmother's grave. Do you think that maybe that's kind of influenced your thinking on this?
It could have been. I think, she was buried with her husband. My wife's grandmother who died, she was buried just down from, well, sadly, both her husband and her son, because my wife's father died like 10 years ago very suddenly.
Good grief.
Yeah, it was really sad. Before I knew her or him, so I never got a chance to know my father-in-law, sadly. But yeah, so she's buried with them,
right?
And but not in the same plot, but in the same graveyard, just a couple down. So it's
right.
Which is what she wanted. She got to an age where she was in her mid-80s and she was talking a lot about this. She was saying, I want to go in there with that, that kind of thing. So she was very clear about what she wanted. But maybe, yeah. I think once I saw that plot for my nan, I think maybe. So I think these things do have a marked effect on you, That's not a pun on your name, by the way.
Well, could be. Hey, that's a marketing technique for me, maybe.
I'll have a marked effect on your plans for death, everyone.
I am absolutely not using that as a marketing slogan, just to make that clear.
Probably wise.
Have you had a thought about what reading you might like at your funeral?
I don't really know. I think, to be honest, I would want a funeral service to be as non-religious centric as possible, I guess. I wouldn't want any kind of traditional readings. I remember my wife's grandmother's funeral, actually, and it felt a lot like a factory line, in a way. A lot of it was very insert into this slot here, and I was disappointed with that. The only spark in what was being said about her was from my wife, who actually was really close to her, knew her very well, and did this lovely speech which was very personalised, but almost everything else could have been ported in from any other funeral.
Was it with a vicar or a celebrant?
It was with a vicar. It was in a church.
Right, okay.
A very disinterested vicar, in my opinion. It felt like this was like she was one of about 4 in a day. It just...
Yeah.
She just didn't feel like she was invested in it. And I think... I mean, I don't know how all these things work, but I just feel like there could have been more thought given. And my wife did give a lot of thought to it, and it really stood out as something that was really personalised to Mary. So I would want something, I think, that whoever knows me best does something along those lines. And I don't really know what a reading would be. I think it would be something to do with, popular culture, because I've got my head in TV and movies and all this kind of thing. But I've tried to think about it, and I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But I just know it would be something along those lines. Something probably that makes people laugh, because what I don't want is a really somber, dour, desperately sad funeral. I think it's become a weird thing, maybe in this country, that everyone is convinced they have to really be sad all the time at a funeral. Whereas I think, why do we do that? Surely we should be, not being happy that someone's gone, but celebrating them and celebrating what we loved about them. And I don't think funerals do that sometimes. They're either locked in a sort of religious pattern, if you're going down a church road, which I certainly won't. I didn't get married in a church. I'm not getting buried in one either. In that sense, I'm not having a funeral in one. So, I just think, let's get rid of the maudlin aspect of it. You can be sad while also having laughter in it, or enjoying the celebration of that person's life. But, I know not everyone sees it that way. But
in my experience as a celebrant, people either want quite scientific type funerals with scientific readings, or they want to emphasise the fact that the person was funny, the person did want a funeral that made you laugh rather than cry. So I almost have those two kind of sides of what I do when I write funerals. I do find it's either we want this funny or we want this scientific.
Yeah. When you say scientific, do you mean a particular structure?
No, I mean the readings. So things about how your atoms will be reformed into something else and things like that. So that's the kind of readings people go for. Something that will make you laugh or something that will make you think.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I can understand that logic. I can understand the logic of wanting to make you think and that kind of thing. But I think it's just got to be, as in line with that person as possible. If that person was quite a serious, focused person, then maybe a big, jokey kind of thing isn't going to work. I don't know. I just think that it's about taking out the last thing I would want is for a few, as I've described, my wedding was nothing normal. My wedding wasn't a traditional slot in here kind of thing. And I wouldn't want my funeral to be either. I feel like the more individualistic you can be generally in all these great points in your life, because, a funeral is the last great point in your life. It's the last signature point in your life.
Yeah.
That then be as individualistic as possible. But I think that's something that's probably going to become more the case with our generation onwards.
I think so.
I think the previous generations are very much locked into a pattern of thought of, well, this is how it is. This is how it's always been. We do it this way. And we don't think that way. I don't think anymore.
We do not.
So, even in death, Mark, we don't think that way.
No. So have you thought about what music tracks you'd like for your entrance, your reflection, and your exit in your funeral?
I think I would definitely like some film score music in there somewhere.
Mm.
I'm not sure that my favourite ever film score, Star Trek The Motion Picture, is going to work in a funeral somehow.
Oh, I don't know. It could be Your Final Frontier.
Maybe. But I don't know how that would work. I think we'd have to workshop it. I think we'd have to, do a practice funeral. Put me in a room, a few, on my deathbed. And I can hear it and go, no, not that one. Skip to track 6. That's better.
Stranger things have been chosen, man. I've done funerals with a Friends theme and with the Coronation Street theme.
The Coronation Street theme, really?
The lady liked Corrie, and people wanted it to reflect her, so Corrie.
Oh, fair play. Yeah, that's really good. Okay, nice. That's fair. Yeah, I think that if I'm honest, I'm not massively into music in a way beyond that. I've always enjoyed bands and I've enjoyed songs, but some people are just dedicated to a particular song or band or anything like that. I'm just not that kind of person, really. So I don't know. Maybe I'd say, right, for an intro and outro song, find a song with the name Black in it. So you've got Back in Black by AC/DC.
Good.
I am quite partial to Black Magic Woman by Santana, but I'm not quite... yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's a good song, but...
Yeah. So yeah, maybe I'd say that. Find songs with the name Black in them. There's loads.
Fade to Black.
Yeah, Fade to Black. Yeah. Young, Gifted and Black. I'm not sure that's going to work somehow. But
okay.
That Old Black Magic by Rod Stewart. That would be a good one.
Yeah, it would.
There we go.
Yeah. And what about the reflection then, where people are actually having a moment to think, and if they want to pray? Perhaps not AC/DC for that.
I really don't know. I think it would, again, I would just have to go back to a particular sort of piece of film music, but I just don't know what it is, Mark. It's like I think I feel bad for this because I don't feel like I've. It's not that I've not given this enough thought. I just don't know what to put in these situations. I don't know if you found this before with other interviews, whether some people have mapped it out in detail or anything like that. But I just find it really difficult. I find it really difficult to think about what the right thing would be for something I'm not there for.
A bit of both, to be honest with you. If you're more into music, like, for example, Colin, who we both know, who does We Dig Music, which, does exactly what it says on the tin, really. He really likes music. He'd very much thought this out. But other people kind of sit there and mull it over while I interview them. And I like both approaches, really.
Yeah, I suppose you get the variety of, like, somebody who has a very fixed idea of a song that fits them and that moment. And I mean, I'm a bit envious of that in a way. I kind of wish I could do that, and I could be certain that I love that song that much that I would want it played as I'm, sent away.
Yeah.
But I just don't. I don't have that, really. Maybe I'll just ask Colin. I'll say, give me a song, Colin. Like, any will do. Just, it's got to have Black in the title. That's it.
I think your choice of film soundtracks is a good one. There's some beautiful, beautiful music on film soundtracks. And, I've had people's use music from Lord of the Rings.
You had Star Wars.
I haven't had Star Wars yet.
That surprises me.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, again, people our age, or maybe even a little bit older, actually, might want that kind of cinematic, sci-fi kind of music, yeah?
I think that might be more common now, really. I think you'll find that'll creep in, because it's a lot more popular than it used to be, as something that people enjoy. I'd say what would really throw people off is if they had to come in to the music from The Shining. That would be really good.
Oh, for goodness
so that's
sake.
Sort of down, 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 down.
You're still not the weirdest. I've had someone who wanted the theme tune from the wrestler Shinsuke Nakamura, so you're still not the weirdest weirdo.
Okay, I'm frustrated at this. I keep thinking I'm going to win this crown.
I mean, I like to say I've got interesting friends, but that's probably the diplomatic way of putting it.
Well, better than the dull people.
Right, so, Tony, thank you so much for being on Life's Milestones. Where can people find you on the internet?
Well, let's do this outro in less than an hour, so we'll cut this down. Two basic places. AJ Black Writer on Twitter is where I mainly hang out. I also have a Facebook page, AJ Black Writer Podcaster, which I update here and there. And then you'll find through that Twitter all of the different things that I'm doing, but the main one, obviously, at the We Made This Podcast Network, which this podcast is part of. We Made This Pod, so you'll find all the different shows and things like that on there, including the two podcasts I'm probably most focused on right now, which is Motion Pictures at Motion Pictures Pod, and Between the Notes, films about film scores, funnily enough, at BTW_notes. So, if you can check those out, I'd be most grateful.
Before we go, any other quick plugs that you want to throw out there?
Well, I have released a book. So if you are interested in TV, movies, and how sort of mythology sort of works in terms of those, the hero's journey, all that kind of stuff that you're probably thinking, But, if you like films and telly, give it a try. It's called Myth Building in Modern Media, The Role of the Myth Arc in Imagined Worlds. I didn't come up with the title. But I'd have had something shorter. But yeah, it's available from McFarland Publishing and on Amazon, either via Kindle or from various different stores. Although if you really want to buy it, give me a message so I can get you 10% off if we do it with a certain method I've got. So yeah, I'd be very grateful if you gave that a check out.
Brilliant. Tony, you've been a fantastic guest. Thanks again for coming on Life's Milestones.
My pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me.
I just want to say one more time, thank you very much to Tony for not only coming on Life's Milestones, but coming back twice after those technical difficulties and being such a good sport about it. These things happen in podcasting and it's frustrating as hell. And of all the people for it to go wrong with, I guess head podcaster general was maybe the person that was going to be the most forgiving. So, it is what it is. This was supposed to go out in May. It's now going out in September, but that's fine with me and that's fine with Tony. I hope you enjoyed, the two, in a way, interviews that I had with Tony. And the reality is that there would be no Life Milestones without Tony. Without him embracing this podcast as part of his network, there wouldn't be this podcast. So thanks to him for that as well, I guess. The last 4 episodes have been with podcasters, people who I do know through this network. And honestly, during the COVID thing where you can't really meet up with people, that has been the easy way for me because these people know how to record their own stuff and get high quality recordings. Whereas you talk to someone who's not particularly au fait with podcasting, it does mean that sometimes the recording quality, if you just record a Skype call rather than record separately on your own computers, it can take a dip. So I've kind of been avoiding talking to people face to face. I'm going to try and rectify that when the COVID restrictions allow me to do that. So hopefully in future we'll have a few more folk outside of my podcasting community, because I don't want to just talk to podcasters. I want to get lots and lots of different interesting people. I've talked about getting people of faith on. I've talked about getting younger people and older people on. I want diversity. So I'm going to do my best. And I might end up with egg on my face because who knows who the next guest is. I haven't recorded anything yet. But regardless of that, I hope you found the last 4 or 5 guests really interesting, because people who podcast are people who've got a voice, people who want to talk. And I hope you found those all really interesting. Before I go, just a reminder that there is a Spotify playlist associated with this show. If you just search for Life Milestones playlist, you'll be able to find it, and all of Tony's choices will be added very shortly. Probably by the time you listen to this, they will have already been added. So check out all of the choices of all of the guests so far on that beautifully peculiar playlist. And thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you in a fortnight. Life's Milestones is a podcast by me, Mark Adams. Follow me on Twitter at MarkAdamsHC. That's also my handle for Instagram. If you're looking for my website, it's www.humanist.org.uk/Mark Adams. If you're looking for my Facebook, it's Mark Adams Humanist Celebrant. All the information on how to use me as your celebrant is there. The show's social media is at Life's Milestones on Twitter. Other than that, I am just using my celebrant contacts for the show. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Cinemortuary podcast.
Well, anyway, we're talking about Werner Herzog now, aren't you? Who's a rule breaker, Wilson.
Yeah. His version of Tom and Jerry was a bit weirder.
Yes, now that I would pay to see.
It's just Tom with a potato masher, just hammering Jerry for an hour and a half into absolute dust and pulp, and then takes his own life at the end by sticking his head in the microwave. Thanks, Werner Herzog. Cheers for that.
Pretty fly a 90s nostalgia podcast.
I actually never had a Nintendo 64. One of my best friends did, though, so he was particularly good at it, and I was particularly shit at it. So I was not much chop when it came to GoldenEye. I was usually the fourth friend. I was the one that everyone picked on. They'd like watch my screen. They'd know exactly where I'm respawning. They all learned the spawns, and like I'd just pop up and I'd be dead in like 10 seconds before I could get a gun.
Yeah, we had a guy like that in the crew. His name was Alan. So yeah, we used to roast Alan big time.
Yeah, so I'm Alan in that situation.
Ask us about Loom, a point-and-click podcast.
Particularly during the King's Quest, Police Quest, Space Quest games. I think Rongo was quoted, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the exact quote, but it's to the point where like you'd be too scared to do anything in Sierra games, where because you're like you'll walk off a path and you'll die. You'll walk past, you'll go onto a screen and suddenly Medusa comes out and turns you to stone.
Sounds like playing Prince of Persia. The original. That was like taking life into your hands.
Yeah. But then the idea being that you'd be too scared to experiment because you'll die and you have to be constantly saving.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.